Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tal Heinrich, spokesperson for the Israeli Prime Minister's office. This is day 145 of the October 7th war. First, I will start with an update on our casualties from this war. IDF fatalities since the start of the October 7th massacre have unfortunately risen to 582. That is up 2 since our last briefing yesterday. The people of Israel grieve with the families of Major Iftach Shachar, aged 25, was killed in battle in northern Gaza. He was from Paran in southern Israel. Captain Itai Seif was 24 when he fell in fighting Hamas, also in northern Gaza. He was from Yerucham. The IDF and all Israelis share in the terrible grief of their families. We will continue to accompany them at this unbearable time. Our hearts go out to all the families of those soldiers killed in action, as well as those who were murdered, taken hostage, and wounded. May their memories be a blessing. Yesterday, the Prime Minister and his wife made a condolence visit to the family home of Neria Belata in Shavei Shomron. Staff Sergeant Neria Belata fell in southern Gaza Strip this past Saturday. The Netanyahus heard about Neria's personality from his parents and siblings and how determined he was to contribute to the country. The Prime Minister said to the family, quote, "I want to stand by you knowing that we will not relent until we achieve total victory over our enemies. This is a principle for our continued existence. This is what Neria fell for, and this is what will happen." In a further indication of the closeness of the United States and Israel, yesterday the Prime Minister mentioned a Harvard-Harris poll indicating that there is overwhelming support from the American people to Israel. This has been an incredible source of strength for us. According to this poll, 82% of people in the United States express support for Israel, while only 18% express support for Hamas. More than 2/3 of Americans indicate they would support a ceasefire only after Hamas is removed from power and all hostages are released. 63% of respondents support Israel's sovereignty over the West Bank. Now, an update from Koget. In addition to the 174 aid trucks which went into Gaza on Monday, overnight a convoy of 31 trucks carrying food made its way to northern Gaza. Over the last 3 days, close to 50 trucks were transferred to northern Gaza. Yesterday, an airdrop operation successfully delivered 160 packages of food and medical supplies to southern Gaza and to the Jordanian Field Hospital in Khan Yunis. This collaborative effort involved Israel, the UAE, Jordan, Egypt, France, and the United States. We say again, there is no limit to the amount of humanitarian aid for the civilians in Gaza. After nearly 5 months of war against Hamas, we know that once humanitarian aid does get in, the terror organization Hamas takes over. Looting is also a problem. But we are working with the Biden administration to find ways to improve the humanitarian assistance delivery. Now, in relation to this, an important update on a story which was carried by the BBC, AP, and other outlets this morning regarding detained Palestine Red Crescent paramedics. Here is what you should know. On Sunday, February 25th, the IDF responded to a request from the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Gaza for assistance in evacuating patients from the Al-Amal Hospital in Khan Yunis. We coordinated the movement, but at no point did the IDF approve the individuals in the convoy. It is important to emphasize that Hamas systematically uses ambulances for transporting terrorists as their taxis. After starting the movement and after receiving intel that there may be terrorists within the convoy, the IDF checked the identity of the passengers as it left the hospital. Again, as we've made clear in previous briefings here, Hamas terrorists have in the past few days been apprehended seeking to disguise themselves as evacuating civilians. Now, during the inspection, 3 Palestinian Red Crescent staffers were stopped for questioning. This was due to credible intelligence regarding their possible involvement in terrorist activity. After questioning them in the field, 2 of the staff members were arrested for further investigation, and the 3rd one was released. Again, Hamas systematically uses ambulances for transporting terrorists. But the UN's response to this entire episode is the most shocking. Following the detention for questioning of the Red Crescent personnel, the UN halted humanitarian coordination for 48 hours. This had a detrimental effect on ordinary Palestinian patients that suffered from this action. We say loudly and clearly, we have repeatedly warned and will continue to warn about the Red Crescent's ties to terrorism. The UN must verify who they are coordinating movements for. This is not the first time. We simply ask this question: does the UN take steps to prevent such abuse of humanitarian work? We'll finish with an update from the north. Sirens sounded in Kiryat Shmona this morning. Around 10 launches crossed from Lebanon into Israel. The IDF aerial defense array successfully intercepted the launches, and the IDF struck the sources of the fire in Lebanon. That brings us to the end of today's briefings, and I will now take your questions in the chat.
Thank you, Tal. First question from Lior Soroka at the Washington Post. Lior asks, Kogat said that today a convoy of 31 aid trucks made its way to northern Gaza last night with the help of the UN. UNRWA denies it had any involvement and says it hasn't got any aid north since January 23rd. If Israel does not want to work with UNRWA, how does humanitarian aid reach northern Gaza?
Well, Lior, thank you for your question. Israel is working with other aid groups, UN aid groups, agencies as well, to make sure that the humanitarian aid that is meant to go to northern Gaza will reach its destination, will be distributed to the civilians there. This is what we're doing. As you know, UNRWA is complicit, is in bed with Hamas. We've shown abundant evidence of this. Their participation, certain members of UNRWA, employees of UNRWA rather, who have participated in the October 7th massacre. You have UNRWA teachers who held hostages, according to accounts, and we've shown that Hamas server farm was right under the UNRWA headquarters in Gaza. We know that UNRWA aid is found in the tunnels used by Hamas, and many other examples of UNRWA's complicity with Hamas, their cover up for the stealing of the aid. I think we have enough of that at this point. So we are working with other agencies on the distribution of aid to the northern parts of Gaza, not through UNRWA.
Thank you. Question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Israeli and Jewish musicians have faced boycotts by staff at venues around the United States who have tried to prevent them from performing. Could you comment, please, on the cultural boycotts effort? It's
appalling. It is appalling. And it shows you that there's a lack of moral clarity in some of these venues, some of these venues that are coming under pressure from, I don't want to say pro-Palestinian, because it's actually anti-Palestinian voices. It's a part of the pro-Palestinian industry, I will say, that is certainly against Israel. But, they're also very certainly also against Palestinians, because, any act of protest, any kind of action from like the ones that you've described that doesn't call outright to the elimination of Hamas, the removal from power, the release of all hostages, it doesn't serve Palestinian civilians as well. And boycotts of this kind, I mean, it's disgusting, it's appalling. It goes back, at the very root of this, I will say that it goes back to anti-Semitism. Yeah.
Thank you. A question from Hannah Julian at the Jewish Press. There are hundreds of miles of tunnels throughout Gaza, including some that are still dangerous to IDF soldiers in the north of the enclave. Does Israel intend, as part of its military goal, to destroy all the terror tunnels that were built by Hamas?
Well, we're talking about, according to the IDF mapping of the tunnels that we've found so far, we're talking about 300 miles, maybe even more, of tunnels that are found across the Gaza Strip, which is really remarkable. Some of these tunnel shafts, most of them, in fact, are found in residential buildings and urban civilian structures, mosques, schools, youth centers, whatnot, hospitals, hospital compounds, as we've shown. So the IDF is clearly, we have units that are working on dismantling this terror infrastructure. There are different types of tunnels and tunnel compounds, tunnel networks, I should say. Some of them are more strategic than others, and the IDF is actually advancing in a very, very impressive pace in dismantling this kind of terror infrastructure. Of course, there's a lot more work to do, including in the southern city of Rafah, which we will get to.
Second question from Hannah Julian at the Jewish Press. Ismail Haniyeh today called on Palestinians to march towards Al-Aqsa on the Temple Mount on the first day of Ramadan. Can you comment on this?
Well, our goal is, of course, to keep other fronts, including Judea and Samaria, Jerusalem, the area of the Temple Mount, as calm as possible. We don't want to see another flare-up on another front. This is why the IDF, and we've invested, we keep investing every day, a lot of focus, security focus on these areas. And it's unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate that there are those who are trying to drag us to wars on other fronts. We certainly don't want to do that. We certainly will do whatever it takes to keep the calm, keep the security, make sure that Israeli civilians, if it's Jews, Muslims, or Christians, are safe, and places of worship, of course, should be safe.
Thank you. A question from Jodie Cohen at World is One News in India. How will Israel ensure that Hamas leaders won't escape to other countries such as Iran via Egypt, and also that Israeli hostages wouldn't be taken with them?
So Hamas leaders signed their own death sentence on October 7th. They sure know it by now. We're coming after them. We'll get to them one after the other. We said that none of the perpetrators and planners of the October 7th massacre will be able to get away with impunity. We stand by it, and we will get to them.
Question from Mr. Rubin at Breslov Israel Media. Israeli President Herzog declared yesterday that he prays twice a day for the release of the hostages. We would like to know if Israeli Prime Minister prays for this purpose too.
I think everyone in Israel prays for the safe return home of the hostages and troops and a total victory over Hamas. There's no doubt about it. We're also very appreciative of, the outpouring of support and prayers from all around the world, from people of different ethnicities and different religions, if it's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, praying for the calm in the region and peace and whatever promotes it.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes the daily briefing for today. We'll see you here tomorrow.